He left his son $500 million, but his dark-skinned daughter only got an old phone. But as soon as she turned it on, chaos ensued. Watch until the end to find out what she found inside. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories, and share this video with your friends. The summer heat clung to the city streets with an unshakable heaviness, even as the black cars rolled up to the church one by one, depositing well-dressed people who wore grief on their faces like a carefully chosen accessory. The tall white steeple cast a narrow shadow over the concrete steps, where mourners whispered among themselves, some dabbing at dry eyes, some glancing at the tinted windows of the limousine, wondering if he would have approved of the service, of the flowers, of the way they were all gathered here for him. Layla stood off to the side, a slim figure dressed in a simple black dress with long sleeves that clung to her wrists, the fabric sticking to her skin with sweat she dared not wipe away. Her dark skin, her tightly coiled curls pulled into a low bun, the deep brown of her eyes that matched the color of his, were all reminders to everyone here of a mistake they believed her father had once made. The men in dark suits and women in conservative dresses glanced at her as if she was a ghost walking among them, a reminder of something they would rather forget, of something that did not belong in their pristine world. She stood quietly, clutching the old black purse that held nothing but her phone, a handkerchief, and a small battered leather-bound Bible her mother had given her before she died. Her mother had been the first shadow in her life, a woman with hands that smelled of lemon oil and dish soap, who had told Layla stories about a world that would never love her fully, about how her darkness would be both her burden and her armor. Her mother had told her to keep her chin up, to keep her voice soft, to stay out of the way. Her mother had died before she could see what it meant for Layla to grow up as the hidden daughter of a wealthy man who lived in a mansion with marble floors and chandeliers that glittered like ice. A man whose name everyone here revered, but whose blood in Layla's veins was a stain they could not wash away. Layla's father was dead now. Oliver Grant, beloved philanthropist, real estate tycoon, and family man, had died in a private hospital room with white sheets and the sterile scent of antiseptic that still clung to Layla's clothes even now. She had been there, standing at the edge of the bed, watching his chest rise and fall, each breath like a mountain he struggled to climb. She had held his hand, feeling the bones beneath the thin, papery skin, and she had thought about how small he looked, how fragile, how human. She had wondered if he would say something to her, something that would change everything, something that would make the years of being hidden worth it, but he had only looked at her with tired eyes and said, "This is all you need, Layla," before pressing the small, old phone into her palm. She had not understood then. She did not understand now. Inside the church, the organ played softly, and the wooden pews were filled with people who nodded solemnly as they were led through prayers and memories that painted Oliver Grant as a perfect man, a loving father, a generous leader. Layla sat in the last row, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes fixed on the polished wood of the coffin that lay before the altar, surrounded by white lilies and roses that smelled too sweet, too heavy, making her stomach churn. The voices of the family members who stood up to speak blurred together, their words melting into each other like wax in the heat. But then he stood up. Joshua Grant, her brother. Tall, light-skinned, with sandy hair cut neatly, a crisp black suit that fit him perfectly, shoes that gleamed under the light filtering through the stained glass. His blue eyes were clear, bright, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who had never known what it meant to be hidden, to be questioned, to be doubted simply for existing. He was everything she was not, everything that made the family proud, everything they claimed as their own. He spoke about their father with practiced sincerity, his voice unwavering, telling stories about fishing trips, about advice Oliver had given him on running the family business, about the way their father had believed in hard work and honesty. The congregation nodded, some dabbing at their eyes, some smiling softly. No one looked back at Layla. No one mentioned her. No one acknowledged that Oliver had another child who stood in the shadows, who shared his blood, but not his name. Not truly. When the service ended, people filed past the casket, laying flowers, whispering prayers, crossing themselves. Layla waited until the end, until the church was nearly empty, before she approached. She stood over the casket looking down at the man who had given her his eyes, who had called her on her birthdays and sent her envelopes with money and notes that said, "I'm proud of you," but never visited, never brought her to family holidays, never let the world know she was his daughter. She whispered, "Why did you give me this?" Her fingers brushing against the phone in her purse, the phone that felt like both a gift and a curse. She waited for an answer, but there was nothing but the soft rustle of the flowers and the breeze from the air conditioning, the faint smell of lilies filling her nose until it made her dizzy. Outside, the sun was blinding, reflecting off the black cars and the white marble steps of the church. The funeral procession moved toward the cemetery, and Layla followed in a taxi, watching the family members climb into the limousine, their faces solemn, their voices low. She sat in the back seat of the taxi, the phone heavy in her purse, wondering what her life was supposed to be now that he was gone, now that the thin thread that had connected her to him had been severed. At the cemetery, the family gathered around the grave, the polished coffin lowered into the ground as the priest spoke about ashes and dust, about returning to the earth, about eternal life. Layla stood at the back, the sun beating down on her, sweat trickling down her spine, the black dress clinging to her legs. She watched Joshua take the first handful of dirt, dropping it onto the coffin with a practiced solemnity, his face calm, controlled. When it was her turn, she stepped forward, feeling the eyes on her, feeling the weight of their judgment, their disdain, their dismissal. She took a handful of dirt, the earth cool and damp in her palm, and let it fall onto the wood below. It was a small sound, a soft thud, but it echoed in her ears like a gunshot. As they left the cemetery, the lawyer approached Joshua with papers in a leather briefcase, and Layla watched from a distance as Joshua nodded, signed something, shook the lawyer's hand. She could hear snippets of conversation, words like inheritance, trust, assets, floating in the air like poison. Later that evening, in the grand foyer of the Grant family mansion, the lawyer gathered the family to read the will. The marble floors were cold under Layla's feet as she stood in the back of the room, her hands clasped in front of her, watching the others as they sat comfortably in leather chairs, waiting for what they believed was theirs. The lawyer's voice was calm, professional, as he read out the details. Joshua Grant would receive the family estate, the businesses, the properties, the cash assets, the investments, amounting to nearly $500 million. The relatives nodded approvingly, some murmuring about how Oliver was a fair man, how he had done what was right. "And to Layla Brooks," the lawyer said, and the room fell silent, eyes turning toward her, some curious, some scornful. "He leaves a personal item of great sentimental value." There was a pause, and the lawyer held up the old phone, the phone that was already in her purse, the phone that was all she would get. There was a soft murmur of laughter, quickly suppressed, but Layla heard it, felt it like a slap across the face. "That is all," the lawyer said, closing the folder with a finality that felt like the closing of a door. The relatives began to move, congratulating Joshua, offering him smiles and handshakes, ignoring Layla as if she were a piece of furniture in the room. Joshua glanced at her briefly, his expression unreadable, before turning away, already speaking to a cousin about the future of the business. Layla stood there, the phone in her purse heavy against her hip, her heart beating so loudly she thought they must all be able to hear it. She felt anger, sharp and bright, cutting through the numbness that had wrapped around her since the moment her father died. Anger at him for leaving her like this, for making her a secret, for making her an outsider in her own blood. That night, she stayed in the room that had once been her father's office, the smell of his cologne still clinging to the air, the shadows deep and heavy around her. She sat on the floor, her back against the leather couch, the phone in her hands, turning it over and over, staring at the dark screen. She thought about her mother, about the way she had told Layla to be patient, to be strong, to wait for the day when she could claim her place in the world. She thought about the way her father had looked at her in that hospital bed, the way he had pressed the phone into her hand, the way he had said, "This is all you need." And for the first time, she wondered if maybe he had not meant it as an insult, as a dismissal. Maybe, just maybe, it was a key. She turned on the phone, the screen flickering to life, the soft glow lighting up her face in the dark room, and she whispered to herself, "What did you leave me, Dad?" The screen asked for a password, and Layla stared at it, her reflection looking back at her. Dark eyes, dark skin, the daughter of a man who had lived in the light while she lived in the shadows. And she decided, in that moment, that she would find out what he had left her. No matter what it was. No matter what it cost. The night in the Grant mansion was thick with a silence that felt like judgment. The halls, so wide and cold with their marble floors and high ceilings, echoed with the soft click of Layla's shoes as she walked back to her temporary room, clutching the phone like it might vanish if she loosened her grip. Every family portrait on the wall seemed to watch her with the same glassy-eyed coldness that the living members of the family had shown her during the will reading. She closed the heavy wooden door behind her, locking it out of habit more than necessity. But the sound of the lock sliding into place was the only moment of certainty she had felt all day. She placed the phone carefully on the desk, its cracked screen reflecting the soft glow of the lamp. The light haloed around the edges of the old leather chair, around the shadows of the books that lined the shelves, around the edges of the dust that no maid had dared to clean since Oliver Grant had gone into the hospital for the last time. She had never felt so alone, even though she had been alone for most of her life. Her mother had always told her, "Your darkness is a part of you, but it is not all of you." Yet the world had never let her forget it. In school, at events where Oliver would stand across the room pretending not to know her, while sending envelopes with checks to pay for her tuition, in the way people's eyes slid over her and then away, uncertain where she belonged. And now she was here, in his house, surrounded by people who shared her blood but not her skin, holding the only thing he had left for her. An old phone. A worthless, cracked, outdated phone that had felt like a final insult when it was pressed into her hand. But the way he had looked at her in that hospital room, the way his eyes had cleared for a moment, the way his fingers had gripped hers, there had been something in that look. "This is all you need, Layla." She turned on the phone. The screen lit up, weak but steady, displaying a simple lock screen with the time and date, an old background image of a mountain range, and a prompt for a password. Layla stared at the prompt, her reflection looking back at her from the glass, her dark skin and tired eyes, her hair coiled back tightly. She tried the obvious first. Her birthday. His birthday. The day her mother died. The day he had first met her in person, a memory etched in her mind as the day she realized who she was in his world. None of them worked. Each attempt brought up a red flash on the screen, the vibration harsh against her palms, a small, cruel denial that she could feel down to her bones. She set the phone down and stood, pacing the room, her bare feet cold on the hardwood floor, her mind a swirl of anger and fear and desperation. She remembered the way he had looked at her when she was 7, hiding under the table during one of the family dinners she had been allowed to attend. He had found her there, her small body curled up, her eyes squeezed shut, hoping to disappear. He had knelt down, his large hands resting on his knees, and he had smiled. "My little shadow," he had said softly, reaching out to brush a tear off her cheek. "You see everything from down there, don't you?" She stopped pacing, her breath catching. "Shadow." She picked up the phone and typed in the word SHADOW. The screen blinked once, twice, and then unlocked with a soft click. Relief and fear washed over her in equal measure as the home screen opened, displaying rows of old apps, some she recognized, some she did not, and a single folder titled "Not for Everyone." Her fingers hovered over it, trembling. She opened the folder. Inside were dozens of files, each labeled with years, some dating back decades, some recent. There was a video file simply titled Layla. Her breath caught in her throat as she tapped it. The video began, shaky at first, and then it settled, showing her father sitting in what looked like his office, the same office she was standing in now, but younger, healthier, the lines on his face less deep, his hair still more salt than snow. "Layla," he said, and her name on his lips was like a small, painful gift. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and it means you have the phone. This phone is everything, Layla. It's your protection, and it's your burden." He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face, looking older in that moment than she had ever seen him look. "There are things I've done, things I've tried to fix, things I've failed to fix. Project Silent Eclipse. If you haven't heard of it, you will. It's dangerous, Layla. It's everything." His eyes lifted, looking directly into the camera, and it felt like he was looking directly into her eyes, seeing her, truly seeing her for the first time. "You're my daughter, my blood. I know the world has made you feel like you're nothing, but you are everything. And this is your proof. But be careful, Layla. Trust no one, not even family. Not until you understand everything." The video ended, and Layla found herself staring at the dark screen, her heart hammering, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The room seemed to close in around her, the shadows pressing against her, the silence of the house now feeling like a threat rather than a comfort. She scrolled through the files, each one requiring a password, each one a locked door she did not yet know how to open. She found another app on the phone, the icon a simple, antique-looking key. She tapped it, and it opened a secondary menu displaying encrypted files with names she did not recognize, numbers that looked like bank account information, strings of code that meant nothing to her. She felt the weight of it all, the heavy, crushing weight of what her father had left her, of the responsibility he had placed in her hands without her consent, without her understanding. She wanted to throw the phone across the room to smash it, to scream at him for leaving her with this, for leaving her alone with this, but she didn't. She sat down at the desk, the chair creaking under her, and she pulled her laptop from her bag. She connected the phone, opening programs she barely knew how to use, determined to learn, determined to understand what he had left her. Hours passed as she worked, trying passwords, reading articles, searching for any mention of Project Silent Eclipse. She found rumors on dark forums, whispers about black ops, about surveillance far beyond the legal limits, about politicians and businessmen who use the project to control and manipulate. It was dawn before she closed her laptop, her eyes gritty with exhaustion, her mind buzzing with information she could not yet piece together. She curled up on the couch, the phone held tightly in her hand, her last connection to him, to the truth, to the family that had never truly claimed her. She fell asleep as the sun rose, the light filtering through the heavy curtains, dust motes dancing in the air, the phone warm in her hand. When she woke, the house was silent. She made herself coffee, standing in the kitchen that had once been alive with laughter she had only heard from afar. The phone was beside her on the counter, and she stared at it as she sipped the bitter coffee, her mind replaying her father's words over and over. Trust no one. She had no one to trust, not really, but she had the phone, and she had herself. She went back to the office, setting up a small workspace for herself, gathering papers, pens, her laptop, and the phone. She laid it all out in front of her, like pieces of a puzzle she was determined to solve. And she began. She began to go through each file, each encrypted message, each whisper of a secret, determined to understand what Project Silent Eclipse was, what her father had done, what he had tried to stop, what he had left her to finish. Because it was hers now, all of it, and she would not run from it. Not anymore. The morning light slanted through the tall windows of Oliver Grant's office, throwing thin bars of gold across the polished floor and the stacks of papers Layla had gathered into neat piles. She had barely slept, her mind turning over the files, the names, the numbers, the codes she could not yet understand. She could still hear his voice from the video, the words echoing like a promise and a curse. Trust no one, not even family. The phone sat beside her laptop, its cracked screen dark, but she could feel its presence like a pulse in the room, reminding her that the moment she decided to open it, she had stepped into something she could no longer step back from. She hadn't meant to stay at the house, but when she woke, it had seemed like the safest place to be. Ironically, the walls that had never sheltered her, now protecting her from the world outside that she knew would come for her once they realized what she had. She moved to the kitchen, the marble countertop cold under her fingers as she prepared coffee, the dark liquid swirling into the cup as the smell filled the room, grounding her for a moment. She had barely taken her first sip when she heard the heavy knock on the front door. She froze, the cup halfway to her lips, her heart pounding, a sickening twist of fear in her stomach. She set the cup down carefully, quietly, and walked toward the door, each step measured, her mind racing through possibilities. She hadn't told anyone she was here, hadn't called anyone, hadn't reached out for help. She peered through the peephole and felt her stomach drop. Joshua. He stood there, dressed in a dark suit, casual yet sharp, the expensive cut of the jacket framing his tall figure perfectly. His hair was combed back neatly, his blue eyes clear and calm, but there was something in the set of his mouth, the tightness in his jaw, that told her this was not a friendly visit. She opened the door just enough to look at him, the chain still on, a thin barrier that felt like a joke between them. "Layla," he said, his voice smooth, as if they were simply siblings sharing a morning coffee. "May I come in?" She hesitated, the words of her father ringing in her mind, but she unhooked the chain and stepped back, letting him in. He walked past her, looking around the entryway with casual familiarity, as if he owned the place now, which he did. He turned to her, his hands in his pockets, studying her with that calm, detached gaze that had always made her feel invisible, even when he was looking directly at her. "I wasn't expecting you to still be here," he said, tilting his head slightly. "I thought you'd be gone by now." She crossed her arms over her chest, the phone heavy in her pocket. "This was my father's house, too." He smiled faintly, a humorless thing. Of course it was." He moved toward the living room, sitting down on the couch, gesturing for her to sit across from him. She remained standing, the distance between them feeling like the only control she had left. "I'm here because I think we need to talk," he said, leaning back, crossing one leg over the other, his polished shoe bouncing slightly. "About the phone." Her heart clenched, but she kept her face blank. "What about it?" Joshua's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Come on, Layla. We both know it's not just a phone. Dad had a habit of keeping things complicated, and I know he left it to you for a reason." She said nothing, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. "Look," he said, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice lowering as if they were co-conspirators. "I don't care what's on it. I don't. But there are people who do. People who think you have something they want, and they're going to come for it. For you. I'm trying to help you." Layla let out a short, humorless laugh. "Help me? By taking it away?" His eyes flickered, and for a moment she saw the irritation behind his calm exterior. "Layla, this isn't a game. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." "You're right," she snapped, "because no one ever told me anything. I was just the hidden daughter, the secret, the mistake he tried to hide while you got everything, while you got to be the perfect son." Joshua's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "You think I wanted this? You think any of this was easy? Dad had a lot of enemies, Layla. He was in deep, and now you're dragging yourself into it too." She shook her head, taking a step back. "No, you're not here to help me. You're here because you're scared. You're scared I know something you don't. You're scared I have something you want." Joshua stood abruptly, the calmness gone, his blue eyes sharp, cold. "I'm here because you're making this harder than it needs to be. Just give me the phone, Layla. Walk away. You don't need to be a part of this." She shook her head again, clutching the phone in her pocket. "No." For a moment they stood there, the tension between them thick, the air in the room heavy with everything unsaid. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair, composing himself. "Fine," he said softly, moving toward the door, "but don't say I didn't warn you." He left without another word, the door closing behind him with a soft click that felt like a warning in itself. Layla stood there, trembling, the phone in her hand now, staring at the door, her mind racing. She knew now that whatever was on the phone, it was dangerous. She knew that Joshua was not the ally he pretended to be, and she knew that she was alone in this. She moved back to the office, sitting down heavily in the chair, the phone on the desk in front of her. She opened it again, scrolling through the files, the videos, the encrypted messages. She found a file titled Project Silent Eclipse Overview, and she tapped it, her breath catching as it opened to a document filled with names, dates, transactions, and notes in her father's handwriting. It detailed meetings with politicians, payments to judges, deals made in the dark, promises exchanged for power, for silence, for control. Her father had been part of it, and then he had tried to stop it. He had gathered evidence, hidden it, and then he had given it to her. Not to Joshua, to her, because he knew she would not ignore it. She scrolled through the names, recognizing some of them from the news, from the papers, from conversations she had overheard as a child when she was supposed to be asleep. Judges, senators, CEOs, and Joshua's name, tied to transactions she did not yet understand, tied to people she did not know, tied to the network her father had tried to dismantle. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, the weight of it all pressing down on her, suffocating her. She wanted to throw the phone away, to walk away, to pretend she had never seen any of it. But she couldn't, because this was her father's legacy. Because this was her legacy. Because she was done being the shadow. She was done being invisible. She was done being the secret. She opened her eyes, the fear still there, but beneath it, something stronger, something harder, something that felt like purpose. She would finish what he started, even if it killed her. The city pulsed outside, its restless hum leaking through the heavy curtains of Oliver Grant's office as Layla sat in the deep leather chair, the glow of her laptop and the cracked screen of the old phone lighting her face. She barely noticed the light shifting from dawn to morning, then to afternoon, as clouds crawled across the sky. She was consumed now, the files unfurling before her like a dark map of her father's hidden world. The document, labeled Project Silent Eclipse Overview, had opened a door she could no longer close. Transaction logs in her father's careful handwriting showed untraceable payments moving through shell companies, flowing into the hands of people Layla only knew as smiling faces on TV or black and white photos in old family albums. Senators, judges, high-ranking police officials, corporate leaders whose signatures graced local charity checks and news articles praising their community efforts. Here, they were just names in a ledger of corruption. And there was Joshua's name, appearing in transfer logs with dates, amounts, and brief notes. Secure channel, Josh intermediary. Request, silence fund, Josh delivery. Silent eclipse expansion, JG oversight. Her half-brother, who had looked at her with practiced calm, who had said she didn't understand, who had told her to give him the phone and leave, was not just an observer. He was involved, deeply. She pushed back from the desk, pacing the room, the air heavy, pressing against her skin. She tried to quiet the pounding of her heart, the way her pulse roared in her ears, but the files were burned into her mind, the words swimming in front of her eyes even when she closed them. She needed help. But her father's words came back like a blade pressed to her throat. Trust no one, not even family. She couldn't go to Joshua, couldn't go to the police, couldn't go to the people her father's documents named. She thought of the lawyers, the smiling friends of her father who had lined up at the funeral, offering Joshua firm handshakes and leaning in to whisper things she hadn't been allowed to hear. They were in this, too. They had to be. That night, unable to sleep, Layla sat cross-legged on the floor with the phone and laptop in front of her, the old Persian rug soft beneath her. She opened file after file, piecing together the story her father had never told her. In video clips, he appeared in different offices, sometimes looking tired, sometimes angry, sometimes scared. Silent Eclipse was supposed to protect, he said in one, his face older, hair thinner. But it became something else. Surveillance without oversight, control. They used it to remove obstacles, to blackmail, to shape decisions. I tried to stop it. I tried to expose them. But I couldn't. In another, he looked directly into the camera, eyes heavy with regret. "I'm sorry, Layla. I couldn't protect your mother from them. I thought I could keep you safe by keeping you in the shadows, by pretending you weren't mine. I thought if I stayed close enough, I could keep them away. But they're everywhere now, and you're the only one I trust." Tears pricked at Layla's eyes, but she forced them back, breathing through the tightening in her chest. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, her soft hands, her quiet strength, the way she had never raised her voice even when the world gave her every reason to. It was in the middle of decoding a string of financial transactions that Layla found the addresses. A list of safe deposit boxes, storage units, and private bank vaults, each linked to a different alias her father had used, each tied to numbered accounts she recognized from the transaction logs. She realized he had left more than just digital files. He had left her physical proof, the kind that couldn't be deleted, the kind that could bring silent eclipse crashing down. She made a plan. The next morning, Layla, dressed in dark jeans and a black jacket, her hair tucked under a cap, the phone zipped into an inside pocket close to her heart. She slipped out of the mansion before sunrise, moving like a shadow through the quiet streets, avoiding the black sedans she had seen parked nearby in the days since the funeral. The first address was in a bank on the west side, an old building with heavy stone columns and brass doors that glinted in the early morning light. She used the key her father had hidden in a box of his old cufflinks, her hand trembling as she pushed it into the lock of the safety deposit box. Inside, there were documents wrapped in plastic, bundles of old cash, a few gold, coins, and a thin leather notebook. She slipped everything into her bag, closed the box, and left without looking back, her eyes scanning the street for watchers, for shadows, for anything out of place. The second was harder. A storage unit in an industrial part of the city, down cracked roads littered with debris and forgotten cars. She waited until dusk, slipping inside as workers left for the day, her footsteps echoing in the cold corridors. She opened the unit, heart in her throat, and found a metal lockbox bolted to the floor. It took her hours to pry it open, her hands blistering, sweat dripping down her back. Inside were hard drives, a portable safe, and a single note written in her father's careful hand. "Use this if they come for you." She took everything. She returned to the mansion, her bag heavy with the weight of secrets that felt like they could drown her. She locked herself in the office, spreading out the contents of the safe deposit boxes on the floor, the papers, the drives, the gold coins reflecting the lamplight. As she began cataloging everything, she heard a noise, a soft, careful knock at the door. She froze, her breath catching, the weight of her father's warning pressing down on her. Trust no one. The knock came again, a little louder this time. "Layla?" Joshua's voice muffled but clear through the heavy door. "We need to talk." She looked at the door, then back at the files in front of her, her mind racing. He knew. Of course he knew. He had let her dig, let her find pieces of the puzzle, and now he had come to take it all away. She didn't answer, moving quickly, gathering the documents, shoving them back into her bag, zipping it closed with shaken hands. She grabbed the phone, holding it tightly as she moved to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see the driveway. Joshua's car was there, but there were others too. Black SUVs with tinted windows, engines idling, men in suits stepping out, scanning the house with sharp eyes. They had come for her. She turned away from the window, her mind moving fast. She had to leave. Now. She heard Joshua's voice again, firmer this time. "Layla, open the door. You don't understand what you're doing." She moved to the back of the office, opening the hidden door behind the bookshelf, the passage her father had shown her once when she was little, when he had whispered, "If you ever need to leave, use this." She slipped through, closing the door behind her just as she heard the front door of the office crack under pressure, the sound of boots on marble floors, the low murmur of voices, Joshua's voice rising above them. "Don't hurt her. She'll come quietly." But Layla had no intention of coming quietly. She moved through the narrow corridor, emerging into the garage, slipping out into the night, the cold air biting at her skin as she ducked into the shadows, clutching the phone and the bag, her breath fogging in the air. She was done being the hidden daughter. She was done letting them decide her fate. She would finish what her father had started, even if it meant running, even if it meant hiding, even if it meant standing alone. Because she was not alone anymore. She had the truth, and the truth would protect her, if she could survive long enough to use it. The city lights flickered like distant stars as Layla moved through the back alleys, the cold wind biting at her skin through her thin jacket. The heavy bag pressed against her shoulder with every step, the weight of the hard drives, the gold, and the documents digging into her bones as if reminding her that every step forward was a step deeper into the war her father had left behind. The phone was warm in her pocket, a heartbeat against her thigh, the cracked screen reflecting every street light as she checked it for messages, for warnings, for anything that might tell her she wasn't alone in this. But the screen remained empty, a silent reminder that the only person she could trust was herself. She ducked into an all-night diner, sliding into a booth in the corner where the flickering neon sign outside cast blue and pink shadows across the cracked vinyl seat. She ordered a coffee she couldn't afford to drink, keeping her eyes on the reflections in the window, on the door, on the people moving outside, every sense straining for danger. Joshua's face kept flashing through her mind, the tightness in his jaw, the sharpness in his eyes as he stood outside the office, demanding the phone, demanding her compliance, demanding her silence. She remembered the way he had once smiled at her when they were children, how he had given her a piece of candy at a family event while everyone else ignored her, how he had ruffled her hair before looking around to see if anyone had noticed, his face falling when he saw their father watching. She remembered the way he had looked at her at the funeral, the way his eyes had slid away from hers, unable to meet them, unable to face what she represented. And she remembered the transaction logs. Josh, intermediary, request, silence fund. JG oversight. The words were burned into her mind, twisting every memory of kindness into a lie, every soft word into manipulation, every promise into a threat. Her coffee arrived, and she wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting the heat seep into her frozen fingers. She didn't drink it. She couldn't taste anything anymore. She pulled out the phone, opening the files again, scrolling through the names, the transactions, the addresses, the dates. Each one was a puzzle piece, a piece of the network her father had spent his life building, then trying to destroy. Silent eclipse. A surveillance program that had turned into a weapon, a tool for control, for blackmail, for shaping the world in the image of those who could pay for it. Politicians, judges, police chiefs, CEOs, all of them part of it, all of them complicit, all of them with blood on their hands. And now it was hers. Not the money, not the mansion, not the family name. This, the truth, the proof, the war. She felt the fear in her chest, pressing down on her lungs, making it hard to breathe. But beneath it was something stronger, something harder, something that felt like the steel her mother had taught her to hide beneath her quiet voice and lowered eyes. Her phone buzzed, making her jump, the coffee sloshing in the cup. She looked down, expecting another threat, another demand. It was a name. Isaiah. A contact her father had stored under emergency only. She hesitated, then answered, her voice barely a whisper. "Hello?" There was silence for a moment, then a voice, low and rough with exhaustion and fear. "Layla?" She froze. "Who is this?" "Your father trusted me," the voice said. "My name is Isaiah. We need to meet. Now." She looked around the diner, at the tired waitress refilling a trucker's coffee, at the two men in the corner arguing quietly over a newspaper, at the empty street outside. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. A pause. "Because your father didn't leave that phone to your brother. He left it to you. He knew you'd do what needed to be done." Her throat tightened. She thought of the videos, of her father's eyes, tired but clear, telling her to trust no one, but also telling her she was the only one he trusted. "Where?" she whispered. He gave her an address, an abandoned building in the industrial district, a place she recognized from the list of storage units her father had left, a place where he had hidden parts of himself, parts of his war. She hung up, sliding the phone back into her pocket, leaving a few bills on the table before slipping out into the night. The cold air hitting her like a slap, clearing her mind, sharpening her fear into focus. She found the building easily. The tall, crumbling warehouse with boarded windows and a rusted door that groaned as she pushed it open. The smell of dust and oil filled her nose, and she moved carefully, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. "Layla." She turned, seeing a man step out from the shadows. He was older than her, maybe in his 40s, with dark skin and tired eyes, his hair pulled back into a short braid. He wore a heavy coat, his hands in his pockets, his eyes watching her with a mix of caution and relief. "You look like him," he said quietly. "Your eyes." She didn't respond, clutching the strap of her bag tightly, ready to run if she needed to. He raised his hands slowly, showing he was unarmed. "I worked with your father. I helped him build Silent Eclipse. I tried to help him shut it down when he realized what it had become." She swallowed hard, her voice shaking. "Why should I believe you?" He sighed, pulling out a small device, holding it out to her. It was a hard drive, marked with her father's initials. "Because he left this with me, told me to give it to you if anything happened to him." She took it carefully, her fingers brushing against his, the cold metal biting into her skin. "I don't know everything," he said, stepping back, his eyes scanning the dark corners of the warehouse. "But I know enough to know you're in danger. They're coming for you, Layla. Your brother, too." She looked at him sharply. "Joshua?" He nodded. "He's in deep. He thought your father would protect him. But when your father turned against the project, Joshua was left exposed. Now he's trying to cover his tracks." Her breath caught. "He sold Dad out?" Isaiah hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." The word felt like a knife, cutting through the last thread of the family she had left. "What do I do?" she whispered. Isaiah looked at her, his eyes hard. "You finish what your father started." She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the bag on her shoulder, the phone in her pocket, the hard drive in her hand. When she opened them, she felt the fear, but it was buried beneath something stronger. Resolve. She nodded. "Okay." They moved to a small table in the corner of the warehouse, spreading out the documents, connecting the hard drives, the phone, the laptop. Isaiah showed her how to decrypt the files, how to trace the transactions, how to connect the names to the crimes, how to build the case her father had died trying to build. Hours passed, the darkness outside shifting as dawn began to creep in through the cracks in the boarded windows, the light catching on the papers, on the screens, on the faces of the people who had sold the world for power. They found names she knew, names she didn't, names tied to murders, to blackmail, to deals that had cost lives and ruined futures. They found proof, enough to destroy Silent Eclipse, to burn it to the ground. They heard the cars before they saw them, the engines rumbling outside, doors slamming, footsteps crunching on gravel. Isaiah looked at her, his eyes calm. It's time. Layla grabbed the phone, the hard drives, shoving them into her bag, her hands shaking but steady. They moved to the back of the warehouse, slipping out into the dawn as the front door burst open, shadows moving inside, voices shouting, footsteps pounding. They ran. Through the empty streets, through the alleys, through the city that was just beginning to wake up. The orange light of morning painting everything in gold as if trying to disguise the blood that was about to be spilled. They didn't stop until they reached a safe house, a small apartment Isaiah had prepared, hidden behind layers of false leases and shell companies. Inside, they collapsed, gasping for breath, the bag between them on the floor, the phone on top, the cracked screen reflecting the first rays of sunlight. Layla looked at Isaiah, her chest heaving, her eyes burning. "I'm going to end this," she said. Isaiah nodded, a small smile on his lips. "I know." And in that moment, for the first time in her life, Layla didn't feel like a shadow. She felt like herself. Ready. The safe house smelled of stale air and old wood, with thin curtains that did little to block out the glow of the city at dawn. Layla sat cross-legged on the floor, the bag between her knees, its contents spread in front of her like weapons. Hard drives, gold coins, documents, her laptop, and the old phone that had led her here. She had been running for so long that her body had forgotten how to rest, each sound outside making her heart jump, each creak of the old building forcing her eyes to scan for danger. But here, with Isaiah watching from the window, she allowed herself to breathe. The cracked screen of the phone glowed in the dim light, displaying file after file of names, transactions, images, emails, and hidden camera videos. Proof of everything her father had tried to expose. Proof that Silent Eclipse was real, that it was more than a whisper or conspiracy theory. It was the hidden machinery that made people disappear, that shifted elections, that silenced reporters and activists with a single encrypted payment. Layla's hands trembled as she navigated the files, but her eyes were steady, scanning each line, committing each name to memory. Her father had trusted her with this, not Joshua, not anyone else, because he knew she would not look away. Isaiah crouched beside her, his presence grounding. "You understand what this means, don't you?" She nodded, eyes still on the screen. "It means they'll come for me, harder than before. It also means you have the power to burn them down," he said, his voice low, measured. "But you have to be smart." She closed her eyes, thinking of the mansion, of the funeral, of Joshua's calm face, and the way he had tried to take the phone from her, the way he had lied about protecting her, all while hiding the blood on his hands. She thought of her mother, who had taught her to be quiet, to be careful, to move like a shadow, and of her father, who had called her that name with pride and sorrow in his eyes. "You're the only one I trust." She opened her eyes, resolve hardening beneath the fear. I'll end this. They spent hours sorting the files into packages, each one containing enough evidence to implicate the people named in them. Politicians who had taken bribes to pass laws, judges who had traded verdicts for payments, police chiefs who had hidden murders, CEOs who had funded violence in other countries for profit. Layla used encrypted channels, creating anonymous accounts to schedule the release of each file to independent journalists, whistleblower organizations, and trusted international media outlets. If anything happened to her, the files would go out automatically. But she didn't intend to die. The final file was different. Labeled simply, "Failsafe," it contained a video from her father, recorded weeks before his death. She hesitated before opening it, her breath caught in her chest. Oliver Grant looked older in this video, his hair almost fully white, his face drawn but his eyes still bright, still alive with the fire that had driven him to gather these files despite the cost. "Layla," he said, and hearing her name, made her throat tighten. "If you are seeing this, you have found what I left you. You have the truth, you have the proof, and now you have a choice." He took a deep breath, leaning forward, his eyes burning into the camera. "You can walk away, disappear. Use the gold, the assets I left you, start a new life somewhere they will never find you. No one would blame you. You deserve to live." He paused, and she saw the tears in his eyes, the way his hands trembled. "But if you stay, if you fight, you will finish what I started. You will burn them to the ground. You will free people who don't even know they are prisoners. You will save lives. But it will cost you." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to claim you, to give you the life you deserved. But I know you, Layla. You're stronger than I ever was. Whatever you choose, I will be proud of you." The video ended, leaving her in silence, tears on her cheeks, the weight of his words heavy but clear. She looked at Isaiah, who had been watching quietly, and nodded. "We fight." That night, they moved to the next safe location, using underground routes Isaiah had prepared, changing cars, changing clothes, wiping fingerprints from everything they touched. They didn't speak much, the silence filled with the weight of what they were about to do. When they arrived, Isaiah began setting up secure communication channels, while Layla began uploading the first packages to journalists and trusted contacts across the globe. Each upload was like a small spark, each transfer a promise of what was to come. As the final file prepared to send, she wrote a message to accompany it. "This is the truth. This is Silent Eclipse. The world deserves to know. Don't let them bury this." She pressed send. At first, there was silence. Then the world began to burn. News sites lit up with headlines, social media flooded with documents, screenshots, videos, lists of names, bank transactions, and internal emails proving the existence of Silent Eclipse and the people who controlled it. Protests began to form in cities. Calls for investigations echoed across news channels, and hashtags began trending worldwide. Layla watched from the small window, the glow of the city suddenly brighter, louder, as if the world itself was waking up, shaking off the chains it didn't know it was wearing. She felt no triumph, only a quiet, heavy certainty that she had done what she was meant to do. But it wasn't over. The knock on the door came late at night, quiet but sharp, 3 precise raps that echoed in the small space. Isaiah moved to the door, peering through the peephole before looking back at Layla, his expression tense. "It's your brother." Her stomach twisted, but she stood, moving to the door, nodding to Isaiah to open it. Joshua stepped in, his clothes disheveled, his eyes wild, his face pale. He looked at her, his lips moving without sound for a moment before he found his voice. "What did you do?" he hissed, stepping forward. "Do you have any idea what you've unleashed?" Layla stood her ground, her eyes steady. "The truth." Joshua shook his head, his hands running through his hair. "You've destroyed everything. They're coming for us. Do you understand that? They'll kill us." She felt the fear, but it was distant now, buried under the resolve that had kept her alive this long. "Then you shouldn't have helped them." His eyes widened, his mouth opening, closing, searching for words that wouldn't come. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," she said quietly. Isaiah stood behind her, silent but present, a reminder that she was not alone now. Joshua's shoulders slumped, and for a moment he looked like the boy she remembered, the one who had given her candy when no one else was looking, who had smiled at her before remembering he wasn't supposed to. "What do we do now?" he whispered. Layla took a deep breath, looking out the window at the city that was beginning to shake, beginning to wake, beginning to fight. "Now," she said, turning back to him, "we finish this." The night outside was alive with sirens, with the roar of voices demanding justice, with the lights of cameras capturing the fall of people who had once thought themselves untouchable. Layla stood by the window, the phone in her hand, the cracked screen still glowing, the last message from her father displayed, "The truth will protect you." She pressed her hand to the glass, feeling the vibrations of a world changing, the fear still there but no longer in control, replaced by the quiet certainty that she had become the weapon they never saw coming. The shadow they had ignored. The shadow that would destroy them. And in the dawn that followed, as the city roared and the world began to shift, Layla knew that she had finally stepped out of the shadow, into the light, on her own terms. If you found this story powerful, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this and share this video with someone who needs to see it. Check out the next videos on the channel to keep exploring stories that will challenge and inspire you.